explosion rocks the little airship, and then there is the strangest sensation. The world seems to implode in on itself, then vanish altogether, then expand back out, the growing roar of the detonation dissipating as quickly as it had risen. Simultaneously, the ship's engines whine back into life. Mina blinks, staring in confusion at the sight that greets her through the cockpit window. Instead of the clear blue skies and rolling white cloud layer of the void sea, she is gazing instead upon a vast, cathedral-like chamber, every surface a mass of interwoven machinery, and she has seen its like. Beyond all reason, she is back within the mechanical confines of the great machine. There are other sights that register in those first disorientating instants. Machine cultists, glowing sigils, some sort of dark ritual in progress. But it is the figure on the central platform, the cultist with his arms raised aloft, that draws her attention. Or, more specifically, the artifact on his finger that powers a whirling vortex of arcanicity-infused ice. "The Ring of Winter," she breathes, and before she has time to consciously process what she's seeing, before the insanity of her change in circumstances has time to paralyze her, she is up and running. "Cadmus!" she yells. "Change of plan! I'm going to need that gun turret! Take the helm!" Hello and welcome to The Lone Adventurer, an actual play solo RPG podcast with me, Carl White. I will be your narrator, your game master, and your guide as we follow our heroes on their journey into the unknown. For this game, I will be using the Chasing Adventure and Starforged rule sets, as well as a variety of other systems, tools, and tables as they take my fancy. A word of warning: the following scenes may contain mature themes and disturbing imagery. Listener discretion is advised. The adventure continues. Before I talk about this episode's intro scene, I need to cover that post-credits scene from last episode. In it, we saw the Whisperer's agent, Rex Volt, who had snuck aboard the Dead Reckoning, and who was now sneaking through the ship in pursuit of his prey, Mina. That appearance actually came from this session's mechanics. I started this episode playing from Mina's point of view, and I decided that rather than recreate her as a chasing adventure character, I was going to continue with my experiment of playing multiple RPG systems. And so, using the Sundered Isles rules, I made a begin a session move. That states, when you begin a significant session or chapter of play, do all of the following: identify or adjust flagged contents and set a flag, review or recap what happened last session, and set the scene by envisaging your character's current situation and intent. In addition, you may spotlight a new danger, opportunity, or insight. That can include a scene hidden from the character's perspective. If you do, envisage a brief vignette. Then, all players take +1 momentum as you return to play from the viewpoint of your characters. I had been wondering what had happened to Rex, and so this seemed like the perfect opportunity to reintroduce him. I gave him his sinister post-credit scene, setting up the new danger, and even went back to episode 60, where I inserted a little foreshadowing. That's a very nice benefit of solo play. You can go back into your own narrative and add a little detail retroactively that supports new revelations that have come up in play. As long as those things are minor and not whole-scale retcons, they serve to enhance the narrative coherence rather than undermine it. It also helps that, in my case, I write my episodes several weeks before I record them, so I have some opportunity to go back and tweak in this way. Then it was on to Mina's actions. I decided that she was going to need to make a roll to process the dramatic change in situation, and the gather information move seemed the most appropriate thing to employ. She got a strong hit, meaning she gained 2 momentum and discovered something helpful and specific. The path to follow or action to take to make progress was made clear to her. I decided with the aid of an oracle roll that this meant she had spotted the voice and the ring, and had correctly identified them as the most immediate threat, and that shooting them both with the ship's guns seemed like a pretty solid plan. We'll find out how well that works out in a little while, but first, let's check in on Tatters and Mara. "This is for Lynn, you deluded bastards!" Mara, her longsword drawn, is sprinting for the closest cultists before any of them have time to react. She tears into them like a dervish, her blade moving with both savagery and deadly precision, hacking down 3 of the masked fanatics before they have time to draw their own weapons. Others draw in, surrounding the deadly warrior. As one, they tug long, wicked-looking daggers from their belts.
"Suffer not an unbeliever to live, brother Cogs,"
cries one, but despite their huge numerical advantage, there is a notable lack of enthusiasm to get anywhere near Mara's lethal blade. Instead, they approach cautiously, blades outstretched, the circle closing in. The voice of the machine snarls in fury.
"None shall interrupt our sacred task. Slaughter these intruders, my brothers, and let their bodily fluids be used as lubricant for the great machine."
He raises a fist, and a torrent of shrieking ice erupts outwards, slamming into the dead reckoning and spreading over her surface, gradually encasing the small airship in a thickening cocoon of ice. Mara doesn't wait for the machine cultists to make their move. Instead, with a warrior's instinct born of years of combat, she identifies the weakest link in the gradually closing ring of steel and attacks. Her blade lashes out, flicking across one man's throat, and in the same instant she dives in the opposite direction, dropping into a roll that brings her in close to 2 more. Too late they spot the dagger that has appeared in her offhand. She drives upwards, leaving the hilt protruding from a cultist's jawline, then spins, taking the second's head clean off with a powerful backhand strike. She gets in behind a third, uses his body to fend off a flurry of panicked cultist knife blows, and then shoves him hard into their center mass, sending cultists stumbling and scattering. Tatters, meanwhile, has taken full advantage of the momentary respite Mara has won for her. She has spent many hours perfecting this casting, a spell that draws directly on the raw energies of the fabric to manifest elemental energies of her own. An intensely bright white point of light flares into life between her outstretched fingers. She thrusts her hands outwards, hurling the light towards the voice of the machine. The point grows in size, expanding into a roaring inferno as it grows closer, but even as it does so, Tatters can see that something has gone wrong. "Oh shit," she manages before the ball of fire is caught up in the swirling energy of the summoning ritual and is amplified exponentially. In an instant, it has expanded 1,000-fold in size and intensity, erupting outward in a blast that catches every person in the huge summoning chamber. Through the inferno, she sees cultists, caught completely unprepared, blasted from their feet, their robes bursting into flames. She hears their screams as the bronze of their featureless masks heat up, searing metal to flesh. She smells the sweet stink of flesh being cooked and realizes that some of that smell, some of those screams, are her own. And that is not the worst of it. Even as the explosion tears through the chamber, she can sense the effect that it has on the ritual. The voice of the machine lets out a triumphant bellow as the power of her spells feed into the conjoining ritual, boosting it, bringing it within a hair's breadth of completion. What has she done? I find this almost impossible to believe, but this is actually the very first time that I've engaged in combat since I started using the chasing adventure rules back in episode 7 of this series. In order to prep for this battle, I needed to build my bad guys, which is super easy in this game. Here's what I came up with for the voice of the machine. Voice of the machine, leader of the machine cult, possessed by the Ring of Winter. Wants global destruction and endless winter. 4 conditions, 2 armor. He wields deadly ice magic, inflicts 2 conditions, is forceful, vicious, and area. His methods are to summon freezing winds, command fanatical loyalty, and summon ice creatures. And for his minions, Machine Cult Horde, fanatical devotants to the great machine. Want an end to the heresy of the flesh. 6C Horde, 4C Group, 1C Solo, 1 armor. They are armed with long, cruel knives, and their methods are to spout doctrine and blindly follow orders. With my foes all ready, it was time to check in with Mythic to see if things began as planned.
"No,"
said Mythic.
"the scene is altered. Remove an object."
The only object that made sense in the context was Mina's skyship, and the only way to remove it that I could think of was for the voice to encase it in ice, effectively removing it from the battle. Next, we got into combat. Mara made a couple of engage moves which inflicted a fair bit of damage on the cultist horde, and resulted in none to Mara thanks to her armor, her ability to fight hordes and groups without taking extra consequences thanks to her not to be trifled with move, and her ability to replenish her armor by using her battle momentum move. She is a really tough customer in a fight. And then, because things were obviously going far too smoothly, Tatters cast a spell, and everything went sideways. She got a partial success on her casting of Fireball, which meant that it worked, but with a consequence. What sort of consequence, Mythic?
"The spell works, but the effect is far more than expected. Exceptionally so, in fact."
Ouch. Well, I suppose that could have been worse.
"Actually, it is. In addition to a big explosion, there is a random event, which moves us closer to the thread, completion of the convergence ritual."
Seriously?
"You're welcome."
Fantastic. That means that the convergence ritual now moves to a D4. One more step, and it is complete. With spectacularly not good consequences, I'm going to assume. Once again, the quest stands upon the edge of a knife. Funny how that seems to keep on happening. Let's hope that things are going a little more smoothly inside the Dead Reckoning. Even as she scrambles down the ladder to the lower gun turret, she can hear the cracking and groaning as thick layers of ice envelop the hull of her little ship. "Cadmus, I don't know how, but I think we've been transported into the heart of the great machine. Unless you fancy shooting the voice of the machine yourself, I'm going to need that gun turret." "That's not going to work, Mina," Cadmus calls back, his head appearing at the bottom of the ladder. "The whole ship is encased in ice. I can't even move the guns, let alone fire them." "That's not the only reason it's not going to work," comes another voice from the top of the ladder. A voice that Mina finds horribly familiar. Rex Bolt. "It's been a while, Min. Your cousin sends his regards. Now, be a good girl. Toss up your gun and come up the ladder slowly. None of your tricks." Mina's mind races. How in the 7 is Rex Bolt here? It had been a terrible, terrible mistake. Workplace entanglements were a bad move at the best of times, particularly in her line of work. But getting mixed up with Rex, of all people, she cringes physically at the memory. Her mind escapes the gravity well of her memory and is forced to face the stark reality of the present moment. No matter how bad getting into a relationship with Rex Volt had been, no matter how much worse it had been getting back out, this is worse still. Rex Volt, Wetworks Specialist of the House of Whispers, is here, now. He wants her gun, he has her trapped, and naturally, as night follows day, that traitorous little shit Alexis is behind all of it. Her fingers tighten on the metal ladder rungs as she wishes desperately they were wrapped instead around Alexis's scrawny little neck. But hatred of her cousin is not going to help her now. What to do? Give up? After everything she's been through? Like hell, she thinks, with a savage grin. If she is going down, she's going down fighting. She hooks an arm around the rung, fishes into a pocket, and pulls out a small device. "Rex? Rex, is that you?" she cries, doing her best damsel-in-distress impression as her fingers work the tiny device. "Oh, thank the seven! Cadmus, we're saved!"
"The one and only, Min. Now, up you pop. There's a dear. Gun first."
She's got him. She can hear it in his voice. His guard's down. Say one thing for Rex Volt. Say he loves a good ego-stroking. "Hold on, I'm throwing the gun up now." The flashbang goes off at the apex of her throw, momentarily blinding and deafening the secret agent. He staggers back, hands to his face, as Mina comes racing up the ladder, sealing the access port to the gun turret behind her. She hurls herself belly first into the corridor, dragging her arcane pistol free of its holster, and opens fire. It is a testament to Volt's near-superhuman reflexes, honed over decades of training and field experience, that even half-blind and half-deaf, he anticipates the shot and evades it. He ducks back into cover, nimble as a cat.
"Hard way it is, then, Min,"
he snarls.
"You always did like to play rough."
"And you were always a pig, Rex. I guess neither of us have changed that much, have we?" Mina scrambles to her feet and finds cover of her own. Her heart is pounding, the gun shaking in her hand, and for all her bravado, she knows she is in deep trouble. Rex Volt is a stone killer, an unarmed combat and improvised weapon master. One-on-one, in a straight-up, close-up fight, she stands next to no chance against him. Which means she needs to keep her distance. She turns and starts to run. It was back to Starforge Sundered Isles for this scene. I kicked off by creating an oceanic profile for Rex, but in the end I didn't use it. Once he and Mina started talking, his dialogue just kind of flowed naturally, and I'm a firm believer in not making a roll if no roll is required. Instead, I just set his rank at formidable and got cracking with the confrontation. The mechanics in this scene were nearly all Sundered Isles combat moves, with the exception of one quick check-in with the Oracle. I had thought it likely Rex had taken Cadmus hostage in order to gain leverage over Mina, but it turned out that he hadn't, and so I figured instead he'd spring a trap when Mina found herself in a vulnerable position. Mina did remarkably well in the subsequent engagement, getting a string of strong and weak hits on her enter the fray, secure an advantage, gain ground, and strike moves. She did fail one roll, but a momentum burn turned that failure into a strong hit. I'm not going to get into the minutiae of those moves and those rolls. If you want to see exactly what happened, it's all in the show notes. The upshot is that so far she has had to make no suffer moves and remains at full health with her momentum at a fairly reasonable 6. Rex's progress track is at 2 out of 10 and Mina is in control. We're ready to go again. I confess I'm a little worried. So far, things have been going remarkably well, notwithstanding that oversized fireball. Maybe I'm just a born pessimist, but I have been burnt often enough in the past that I can't help but see a pattern. My Game Master emulator lulls me into a false sense of security and then whips the rug out from under my feet with a string of misses, misses with matches, and disastrous surprise events. In a matter of moments, my fragile PC's plans lie in ruins, and we're back to the brink of disaster. So, what do you say, Mythic? Do you have any rug-tugging planned?
Perish the thought.
I'm afraid that's not really filling me with confidence. Regardless, the only way is onwards, whether that be towards triumph or calamity. So let's see what fate the dice have in store for us. Mina dashes back the way she came, using the handrails to propel herself along the narrow corridor, dreading a knife in the back at any moment. Her only hope is that it will take Rex a few seconds to shake off the effects of that explosive, precious seconds that she can use to make it back to the cockpit unscathed. The fact that she does manage it comes as fairly cold comfort. There is nowhere to go from here. The cockpit is small, just a couple of seats and enough standing room for her erstwhile companion, Barbican, who stands impassive as ever, observing events with a cold, mechanical detachment. There is no other exit, and she knows Rex will be on her in an instant. The windows are encased in thick ice, blocking out nearly all exterior light, and she gets a sudden, desperate idea. She fumbles for her goggles, adjusts them, then flips a series of switches on the cockpit dashboard. The cockpit is plunged into darkness just instants before Rex dives through the doorway, though to her goggles it is bright as day. She takes a shot, but even as she does so, she knows she's far, far too slow. The agent is across the darkened room and barreling into her. Before she can fire, she finds herself sprawling on the steel plate floor at Rex's feet. The agent's laughter is cold and mocking.
I'd forgotten how much of a sneaky bitch you were, Min. It's not going to help you, though. Alexis said dead or alive, but on balance, I think dead suits me better.
The terror that seizes Mina then is worse than debilitating. She knows full well that even in total darkness, this man is more than capable of killing her with his bare hands. She is utterly at his mercy, and she knows for a fact that he has none. Worse still, she knows that for all his veneer of cool professional detachment, the bastard will enjoy it. Beneath that suave exterior beats the heart of an utter psychopath. But something keeps her moving. Though her brain tells her it's over, her body refuses to lay down and die. She scrambles backwards, a part of her realizing that he must be tracking her by sound alone. Time to take that away from him. She slams a button on the dashboard, and the proximity alarm begins to sound, deafening in this small space. In the same instant, her thigh erupts in white-hot pain as Rex's dagger slices into her.
First blood, Min, darling, he calls over the siren. Not the last, I promise you.
She half dives, half topples over the pilot's seat, and lands on her back, her gun raised in both hands. Through her night vision goggles, she sees him coming at her fast, and fires. There is a grunt of pain, a spray of blood, but he keeps on coming, diving onto her, a knee in the guts that knocks the breath from her lungs and leaves her gasping. With a precise flick of his blade, he slashes at her hand, sending the gun and two of her fingers spinning across the room. She doesn't even have the breath to scream. "Barbican, for the love of the seven, help me!" she gasps, but the automaton merely gazes at the combatants, utterly unresponsive.
No help from your tin can, I'm afraid, Volt growls. Time's up, love. I told you last time I saw you. No one walks out on Rex Volt.
That smooth, silk-voiced bastard, so certain, so sure of himself. Mina's terror turns to rage. She glances to her right, sees the shielded cable running up into the dashboard, and before Rex can react, she has torn the heavy cable free and jammed the sparking end straight into his neck. Volt goes rigid, his teeth clenched and back arcing as raw arcanicity blasts into him, bathing the small cabin in stark light and shadow. Mina violently shoves him off her, rolls to the left, her hand reaching desperately for her gun. Her fingers close on the grip, and she spins and fires. But Volt has recovered faster than she could have imagined. He is diving for her, her arcane projectile merely tearing off one ear, and then he's on her, hands grabbing at her throat and hauling her to her feet. She is slammed with bone-jarring force over the console and into the ice-shrouded window.
You fucking bitch!
Volt snarls, smoke curling from his hair, blood spurting from the ruin of his ear. An ugly black wound covers half of his neck and jaw, blood running freely from the wound in his calf, and his shoulder is a mess.
I'm going to gut you and watch you bleed out slowly!
He's not looking so suave now, a distant voice in Mina's head observes with grim satisfaction. But it doesn't alter the fact that she is out of weapons and out of time. Or is she? She has sunk her mind into this little ship on a number of occasions, and she knows its systems well, and her hand is on the controls. She cuts all power with a sharp twist of her wrist and a push from her mind, and in an instant they're in freefall. The dead reckoning slams into the ground with a force that hurls both her and Volt hard into the cabin ceiling, then back down into the console. There is a sharp, awful crack, and Mina is dimly aware through all the other pain that her arm has been broken. Her eyes flicker open to see Volt kneeling astride her, his hands clasped around her throat. All illusion of urbanity is gone, the savage grimace that twists his blood-caked features revealing all too clearly the monster that lies beneath. It is then, as consciousness fades, and with as little effort as the turning of a page, she steps into Barbican's mind. It is suddenly an open book, so clear to her, that tiny part of herself that remains within the mechanical mind, very deep beneath the alien architecture of the Doomspire's consciousness. She takes control. Barbican stoops, picks up Mina's pistol, and fires. And Rex Volt's head explodes. I think I'm with Alan Moore on this one. Ian Fleming's James Bond is a total bastard. The very definition of misogyny and toxic masculinity, at least from our 2025 perspective. Even for the 1950s, Fleming was pretty over the top. Check out those original Bond books rather than the more recent rewrites if you don't believe me. Anyway, that scene. Good lord, but that got intense. I thought that Mina might have finally met her match there. She took a hell of a beating, both narratively and mechanically. The full mechanical breakdown of the scene is in the show notes as always, and I'm not going to go through it all line by line for both our sakes. It's available to read if you're curious. What I will say is this. Starforged absolutely rules for cinematic combat scenes. The way it switches you so smoothly between narrative trigger and mechanical outcome, back and forth with just a few simple moves, is breathtaking to experience in play. I was on the edge of my seat the whole way through that fight, wondering if Mina would survive, experiencing shock as the fight grew ever more savage and visceral, learning in real time just what an absolute bastard her opponent was. I think I need a bit of a rest after all that violence. Only, we still have the outcome of the battle between the machine cult and Tatters and Mara to deal with. I hope you'll join me for that. Next time. Before I go, I wanted to say thanks again to the wonderful Simon Williams, creator of the epic Legend of the Bones solo RPG podcast, who appears once more as the voice of my mythic GM emulator. If you've not listened to Legend of the Bones yet, what are you waiting for? Go and give it a listen right away. Simon is a master of his craft. And thank you to you too. It's your continued support of this podcast that keeps it going, and it is deeply appreciated. You have been listening to The Lone Adventurer, a solo RPG podcast played, written and performed by me, Carl White. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider telling your friends about it or leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a huge help. You can follow me on BlueSky at theloneadventurer.bsky.social. Email me at theloneadv@gmail.com or follow my blog at carlillustration.wordpress.com. You can find show notes for this episode and all others at theloneadventurer.podbean.com, where I include any links mentioned in the episode, as well as mechanics information. I also include a link to a full episode transcript. The story will continue in the next episode of The Lone Adventurer. Thank you for listening.